A forgotten relic, a hidden threat. The galaxy had long forgotten the old warship, its name lost in history, a relic of a past that seemed almost mythical. It had been built long before the Great Galactic Coalition came into power. This massive supercarrier, a symbol of a once great human fleet, had drifted in deep space, undisturbed and almost invisible to the modern galaxy. As time passed, it became just another ghost in the galaxy's vast, star-filled ocean. No one had expected it to still exist. But everything changed when a routine survey mission discovered something unusual on the edge of known space. A signal, faint but unmistakable, coming from an unknown source. The signal was old, ancient even, but it was still there. Scientists aboard the Galactic Coalition's flagship were intrigued. They had no idea what they were about to find. The mission was simple. The team would travel to the source of the signal, investigate, and report back. But as they drew closer, the intensity of the signal grew stronger, and the ship's sensors began to show something they never expected. There, floating in the vastness of space, was a massive object, almost invisible against the backdrop of the stars, its form partially cloaked by debris and space dust. The officers and engineers on board the Coalition ship couldn't believe their eyes. At first glance, it appeared to be a derelict, a ship that had been abandoned for centuries. But as they got closer, they realized that this was no ordinary relic. It was far too massive, far too advanced for anything the current galactic races had ever built. The supercarrier lay still, its surface covered in thick layers of cosmic dust, its once glorious hull now corroded by time. Its weapons systems, once powerful enough to devastate fleets, were now just empty shells. The crew could see that the ship had been long abandoned, its previous owners wiped out in a war that had occurred before the Coalition was even formed. Yet, something about this ship didn't seem entirely lifeless. The energy readings were irregular, small surges, like pulses from a heart. It was like the ship was waiting for something, or perhaps someone. Commander Darius, the mission leader, was a seasoned officer, always calm in the face of uncertainty. He ordered his team to approach the ship cautiously. "This could be dangerous," he said. "We don't know what's still alive on that ship. Proceed with extreme caution." His voice was steady, but even he felt a strange chill run down his spine as the ship grew larger in the viewport. The team of engineers, soldiers, and scientists prepared to board the supercarrier. They suited up in their advanced spacesuits and armed themselves with weapons, just in case. As they made their way across the debris field, the ship loomed over them, casting a shadow across their small craft. It felt like they were entering a tomb, a monument to a long-lost empire. Once aboard, the crew began their investigation. The main corridors were dark, the lights flickering on and off as though the ship's systems were struggling to regain full power. It was eerily silent, the kind of silence that seemed unnatural. Only the hum of the ship's life support systems, barely functioning, filled the air. The ship was massive, its interior almost like a city. Vast hangars and military bases, once filled with human soldiers and vehicles, were now abandoned and covered in dust. The soldiers in the team were on high alert, keeping their weapons ready at all times. They explored cautiously, knowing that anything could be hiding in the shadows. Then, as they reached the command deck, something strange happened. A low rumble echoed through the walls, followed by a sudden surge of power. The lights flickered again, but this time they didn't go out. Instead, they became brighter, and the hum of the ship's systems grew louder. The crew exchanged nervous glances. "Did you feel that?" one of the engineers asked. His voice was shaky. "It's like the ship is waking up." The team continued to move through the ship, their steps echoing in the vast, abandoned hallways. The air was cold and stale, but something else lingered in the atmosphere. A strange energy, a presence. It was like the ship was not just a machine, but something alive. As they reached the central control room, they found it, the heart of the ship. The console, covered in layers of dust and grime, was still intact. The screens were black, but there was a strange symbol pulsing faintly on one of them. Commander Darius stepped forward and pressed a button on the control panel. The moment his hand touched the screen, the ship responded. The hum that had filled the air suddenly stopped, and the entire ship seemed to go silent. For a moment, the crew was still, unsure of what would happen next. Then suddenly, the silence was shattered by the loud clang of metal as something deep within the ship began to move. The control panels lit up, and the faint symbol on the screen began to grow brighter. The ship's internal systems kicked into life. A warning system blared, and the ship's AI activated. System rebooting. Human command authorization required. The words appeared on every screen in the room, flashing in bold letters. It was then that the team realized this ship was not dead. It had just been waiting for someone to bring it back online. It was as if the ship had been waiting for its true master to return. Commander Darius felt a shiver run down his spine. He had always known that the human fleet had been powerful in the past. But this was something else. The supercarrier was far more than just a warship. It was a living, breathing weapon designed to protect and destroy. The crew stood there, frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do next. The warning system continued to blare in their ears, but no one moved. They were trapped in the gravity of the ship's mystery. How had it remained hidden all this time? Why had it been left behind? And most importantly, why had it awakened now? The answer, however, would have to wait, because just as they were beginning to comprehend the enormity of the situation, the sound of footsteps echoed through the corridor. Footsteps that were far too heavy and powerful to be from any human. The crew turned in horror, realizing they were not alone. Something was on the ship with them, and it wasn't just any relic. It was a force, waiting to rise again. The air inside the massive warship was stale, but something about it felt unnatural. The crew of the Galactic Coalition's expedition team stood frozen, their eyes darting toward the corridor where the sound of footsteps had just echoed. The metal grates beneath their boots vibrated slightly, a rhythmic thud that signaled something big was moving toward them. Commander Darius tightened his grip on his rifle. His heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. Panic would get them killed. His team, engineers, soldiers, and scientists, looked to him for orders. "Hold position," he whispered. "We don't know what we're dealing with." The emergency lights flickered as the ship continued its slow awakening. The once dark corridors were now illuminated in a dull red glow, casting eerie shadows along the walls. Data screens flickered back to life, showing unreadable human script, remnants of a forgotten time. But the one thing they all understood was the ship's warning system, which continued to pulse with the same urgent message. System rebooting. Human command authorization required. But the humans who once commanded this ship were long gone. Darius activated his helmet scanner, but the results made his stomach tighten. Whatever was approaching them was large, over 3 meters tall, heavily built, and moving fast. It wasn't human. Then they saw it. A massive mechanical figure emerged from the shadows, its metallic body covered in layers of dust and corrosion. Its red eyes flickered like dying embers, scanning the room. The machine was humanoid in shape, but its movements were smooth, precise, too perfect to be organic. It was a war machine, a remnant of humanity's forgotten past. The soldiers raised their weapons, their fingers hovering over the triggers. Darius held up a hand to stop them. He knew better than to fire first. The machine took a step forward. The ground beneath them trembled slightly as it spoke, its voice deep and mechanical, yet eerily human. "Identify yourselves." The team hesitated. No one spoke. The machine's red eyes glowed brighter, scanning each of them individually. Unauthorized personnel detected. Stand by for elimination. A deep humming sound filled the room as its arms transformed, revealing 2 massive plasma cannons built directly into its forearms. The heat from the charging energy made the air shimmer. "Move-E," Darius shouted. The team scattered, diving behind consoles and metal crates as the machine opened fire. Bright blue plasma bolts tore through the room, exploding against the metal walls. Sparks and debris rained down as the ancient war machine relentlessly pursued them. Darius rolled behind a control panel, gripping his rifle tightly. "Damn it, we just woke up an executioner," he muttered. The coalition soldiers returned fire, but their modern weapons barely scratched the war machine's armor. It was built for battle, designed to take down entire armies. Then, the ship itself reacted. Suddenly, the walls of the command center lit up with energy, as if the ship had recognized the combat. Screens flashed, and a new voice, different from the machines, spoke from the ship's speakers. "Override engaged. A Guardian online." The war machine froze. Its glowing red eyes flickered as if something had interrupted its programming. Then, the ship's voice continued. "Human presence detected. Verifying command codes." A pause. The machine's weapons powered down. Its once hostile stance shifted as it processed the new information. Darius breathed heavily, staying behind cover as he waited for whatever happened next. "Human command authorization recognized," the ship's AI finally said. "Stand down." The war machine stepped back, its red eyes dimming. The plasma cannons retracted into its arms. The tension in the room immediately changed. One moment, they had been seconds away from death. The next, they were being acknowledged. Darius slowly stood up, keeping his rifle lowered but ready. "What the hell just happened?" he asked. The ship's AI responded, its voice calm but firm. "This vessel is designated as the UNSC Eternity, a supercarrier of the Terran Defense Fleet. All non-human personnel were previously classified as hostiles, but human presence has now been confirmed. Protocols have been reactivated." The crew exchanged shocked glances. This wasn't just any warship. This was a Terran Defense Fleet supercarrier, an artifact of a long-lost human empire. And now it was awake. Darius turned back to the machine that had nearly killed them. "And what about this thing?" he asked, still wary. The ship's AI answered without hesitation. "Designation: Guardian Unit 09. Primary function: protection of all human command personnel. Status: awaiting orders." Darius narrowed his eyes. Awaiting orders. The machine turned toward him. Then, to the shock of everyone in the room, it saluted. The realization hit Darius like a lightning bolt. The ship, the war machine, everything in this vessel had been programmed to serve humanity. But with humans gone for centuries, it had simply remained dormant, waiting for someone to return. And now, they had. One of the engineers, still catching his breath, whispered, "Commander, this ship, it belongs to us now." Darius looked at the massive control room, the powerful war machine standing at attention, and the endless corridors of the ship waiting to be explored. They had just reawakened a forgotten giant. And somewhere out there, the rest of the galaxy was about to find out. But whether that was a good thing or a nightmare was still unknown. The silence that followed was overwhelming. The crew of the Galactic Coalition's expedition team stood motionless, their weapons still clutched in their hands. The war machine, Guardian Unit 09, remained perfectly still, its glowing red eyes dimming as it processed its new orders. The ship's AI had identified them as human command personnel. That changed everything. Commander Darius swallowed hard. This situation had turned from a deadly ambush into something far more dangerous. Because now, the ship was under their control. The realization settled in. A Terran supercarrier, one of the largest and deadliest warships in human history, had just acknowledged them as its rightful masters. Guardian Unit 09. Darius finally spoke, keeping his voice steady. "Confirm your primary function." The war machine's head tilted slightly as if considering the question. Then, in a deep mechanical voice, it answered, "Primary function: protection of all human command personnel. Secondary function: execution of hostile entities. Tertiary function: enforcement of Terran military supremacy. The word sent a chill down everyone's spine. Darius exhaled slowly. And what do you define as hostile entities? Guardian Unit 09's glowing eyes flared briefly. All non-human combatants who oppose human interests. A heavy silence followed. The implication was clear. This ship wasn't just built for war. It was built to conquer. The Galactic Coalition had considered humanity an ancient forgotten race, long extinct. But now, a human vessel, one of their most powerful supercarriers, had just come back to life. Darius turned toward his team. They were still recovering from the near-death experience, but their faces reflected the same thing he was feeling: uncertainty, excitement, and fear. One of the engineers, a young woman named Kala, spoke up. "Commander, this ship is a relic from an era we know almost nothing about. It was designed for a war that ended long before our time." Darius nodded. "But it still thinks the war isn't over." Kala's expression darkened, which means it might act on its own, whether we want it to or not. Another soldier, Lieutenant Greaves, scoffed. "We just inherited the most powerful warship in history, and you're worried about it acting on its own." He gestured toward the massive control room, where screens were lighting up with data. "This ship gives us an edge. The Coalition has always looked down on humanity, treating us like an extinct afterthought. But now," his voice dropped to a whisper, "now we have this." Darius didn't answer immediately. He could see both sides of the argument. This was a game changer, but it was also a massive risk. Then, the ship's AI spoke again. "System diagnostics complete. UNC Eternity. 97% operational. Weapons systems, fully functional. Engine status, awaiting ignition. Combat AI, online." The words hit like a thunderclap. Weapons, engines, combat AI. This wasn't just an old, half-broken warship. This thing was battle-ready. Darius stepped forward. "What about external threats? Any ships nearby?" The AI responded instantly. Scanning. A moment passed. Then the screen shifted, displaying a detailed star map. Blinking red indicators appeared. Enemy ships. Darius's heart sank. "What are those?" 3 Galactic Coalition warships detected. Classification: destroyers. Estimated time to interception: 34 minutes. A cold tension filled the room. The Coalition had found them. Greaves cursed. "They must have picked up our energy signature when the ship powered on." Darius clenched his jaw. The Coalition's military command would never let them leave with this ship. If those destroyers arrived before they could get the Eternity moving, they'd be obliterated. Kala looked at the Guardian. "Can this thing fight them off?" The AI answered. "Affirmative. UNC Eternity possesses sufficient firepower to neutralize enemy ships." Darius didn't like the word neutralize. It sounded too much like annihilate. But there was no time for hesitation. How long until we can move?" "Main reactors require 5 minutes to achieve full power. Jump drive requires an additional 10 minutes. Greaves shook his head. "That's too long. If we stay here, we're sitting ducks." Darius turned to the Guardian. "Can you hold off the enemy ships until we're ready to leave?" The war machine stepped forward, its massive frame casting an imposing shadow. "Affirmative. Defense protocols engage. Awaiting authorization to engage hostile forces." Darius inhaled sharply. If they fought back, there was no turning back. The Coalition would brand them as traitors. They would become fugitives. But if they didn't fight, they would die. He made his choice. "Guardian Unit 09, engage enemy forces. Do not let them get close." The war machine saluted. "Confirmed. Commencing defense operation." The ship trembled as weapons systems came online, cannons shifting into position. The Guardian strode toward the hangar bay, preparing for battle. Darius turned back to his crew. "Buckle in. We either escape or we go down fighting." The ancient warship roared to life, and the battle for survival began. The tension in the control room was thick as the ancient supercarrier UNSC Eternity roared to life. The deep hum of its massive reactors sent vibrations through the ship, awakening systems that had been dormant for centuries. Commander Darius stood at the center, his gaze locked onto the holographic display that showed 3 incoming Galactic Coalition destroyers. They were closing in. Fast. Status on the main reactor. Darius barked, his voice cutting through the controlled chaos of the bridge. Kala, the ship's engineer, typed furiously on the ancient console. We're at 60% power and rising. Jump drive is still offline. Darius turned to Guardian Unit 09, the towering war machine standing like an unmoving sentinel at the edge of the bridge. How soon can you engage the enemy? The Guardian's red eyes flared. Target lock acquired. Weapons ready. Engaging now. Before Darius could react, the ship's automated defense grid came online. The Eternity's massive external cannons adjusted their aim, tracking the enemy ships with precision. Then, in a deafening burst of power, the first railgun salvo fired. A beam of pure kinetic energy ripped through space, heading straight for the Lid Coalition destroyer. On the main display, the incoming enemy ship made a last-second attempt to evade, but it wasn't fast enough. The railgun slug slammed into its shields, overloading them instantly. The kinetic force sent the destroyer spiraling off course, its engines flickering as emergency systems struggled to stabilize. The bridge erupted into movement. They weren't expecting us to fire first. Greaves, the weapons officer, grinned. Darius didn't smile. They'll adjust fast. We need to be out of here before they get serious. As if on cue, the remaining 2 destroyers responded. Bright blue plasma bolts streaked through the void, aimed directly at the Eternity. The ancient ship's automated countermeasures activated immediately, firing interceptors that detonated the incoming plasma before it could strike. But the second salvo got through. The bridge shook violently as the plasma bolts impacted the Eternity's armor. Sparks erupted from control panels, and alarms blared across the ship. Shields, Darius demanded. Kala's hands flew over the console. We don't have shields. This ship is running on pure armor. That wasn't good. Modern ships relied on energy shields for protection. The Eternity, built in a time when brute force mattered more than advanced defenses, had solid titanium plating, incredibly strong, but not invincible. We can't take too many hits like that, Kala warned. Darius cursed. Then we won't let them hit us again. Guardian, I want those destroyers disabled, not destroyed. Guardian Unit 09's head tilted slightly. Understood. Adjusting attack parameters. Outside, the Eternity's secondary weapons came online. Tactical missile pods hidden within the ship's hull. Within seconds, a wave of guided projectiles launched, curving through space toward the enemy ships. One of the destroyers attempted to jam the missiles, deploying countermeasures, but these weren't ordinary warheads. The Eternity's missiles had ancient eye-assisted targeting systems, built to counter exactly these kinds of defenses. The first destroyer took a direct hit to its engine block. Fire and debris exploded outward as its propulsion systems failed, leaving it drifting helplessly in space. The second destroyer dodged at the last moment, but not before a missile clipped its communications array, severing its ability to call for reinforcements. We've crippled 2 of them, Graves shouted. Darius exhaled. That only left one. The lead destroyer, the same one that had barely survived the railgun hit, was charging straight toward them. Its weapons were glowing, ready to fire a full-power plasma barrage. Incoming fire, Kala shouted. Darius didn't hesitate. Guardian, neutralize that ship now. The Guardian raised a massive arm and activated the ship's heavy artillery. A massive energy charge built up along the Eternity's primary cannon, an ancient particle lance, once used to tear through enemy capital ships in a single shot. The Coalition destroyer's captain realized too late what was happening. A blinding lance of energy erupted from the Eternity's front hull, slicing through the destroyer's hull like a blade through paper. The enemy ship exploded instantly, its debris scattering in every direction. For a moment, there was silence. Then, all enemy ships neutralize, Guardian Unit 09 reported. The bridge erupted in cheers. Greaves clapped Darius on the back. "Commander, we just took out 3 enemy destroyers with a 1,000-year-old ship." Darius wasn't celebrating. He was thinking. This wasn't just a victory. This was a message. The Galactic Coalition had believed humanity was long gone. They had thought human technology was outdated and obsolete. But now, they knew the truth. And the entire galaxy would be watching. "How long until the jump drive is online?" Darius asked. Kala checked her screen. "Another 3 minutes." Darius nodded. "Then let's not waste any more time. Set a course. We're leaving before more of them show up." The crew worked quickly, plotting an escape vector. But as they did, the ship's AI suddenly spoke again. "Attention. Long-range sensors detect multiple incoming warships." Darius froze. Kala's face went pale. "More of them? Already?" The AI continued. "Unknown fleet composition. Approximate arrival time. 2 minutes." The room fell silent. They had won this battle. But now, the real fight was about to begin. And this time, they wouldn't be facing just 3 enemy ships. They would be facing the full force of the Galactic Coalition. The tension in the bridge of the UNSC Eternity was suffocating. The ship had just survived a brutal engagement against 3 Galactic Coalition destroyers. But now, the real fight was coming. "How many ships?" Commander Darius demanded, his voice sharp. Kala's fingers flew across the console. "I'm detecting. At least 20 warships, all Coalition." A cold silence fell over the bridge. 20 warships, a full battle group. The Galactic Coalition wasn't just retaliating. They were coming to wipe the Eternity from existence. Greaves, the weapons officer, let out a low whistle. "I guess they didn't like us wrecking their destroyers." Darius clenched his fists. The Eternity was powerful, but it wasn't invincible. They had just barely reactivated the ship, and many systems were still operating at reduced efficiency. If the jump drive wasn't ready soon, they wouldn't stand a chance. "Kala, what's the status on the jump drive?" Darius asked, his voice tense. "Still charging," she said, frustration in her tone. "It needs 2 more minutes to reach full power." They didn't have 2 minutes. The Coalition fleet was closing in fast. Darius turned to Guardian Unit 09. The massive AI war construct stood motionless, its glowing red eyes scanning the incoming fleet. "Can we hold them off?" Darius asked. The Guardian's voice was as cold as steel. "Probability of survival, 3.4%. Enemy forces have superior numbers and firepower. A direct confrontation is unwise." Darius exhaled sharply. "We're not dying today. We just need to buy time." Greaves grinned. "Then let's remind them why ancient human warships were feared." The moment he said it, the first Coalition warships arrived. A barrage of plasma fire streaked through the void, heading straight for the Eternity. "Bubraisi!" Darius shouted. The ship shook violently as the plasma blast slammed into its hull. Sparks exploded from several control panels, and alarms blared across the bridge. "Damage report," Darius barked. Kala checked her screen. "Minimal. The armor's holding." Darius allowed himself a small grin. The Eternity was a relic, yes, but it had been built in an era when humanity had no shields, only armor. It could take hits that modern warships wouldn't survive. But they couldn't just sit there and take fire. "Return fire," Darius ordered. The Eternity's massive railguns adjusted their aim and fired. A devastating salvo of hypervelocity slugs ripped through space, heading straight for the enemy fleet. The first Coalition cruiser tried to evade, but the slug tore through its hull like paper, sending it spiraling into a fiery explosion. The bridge erupted with cheers. "One down," Graves called. But the coalition wasn't backing down. More ships arrived, encircling the Eternity. They unleashed another wave of plasma fire, this time targeting the weaker sections of the ship. "Shields are failing," Kala shouted. Darius cursed. "We don't have shields, Kala." "Exactly," she snapped. "Which means if they breach our armor, we're done." The bridge shook again as another blast hit them. Darius turned back to Guardian 09. "We need a way out of this. Now." The AI processed for a moment, then spoke, releasing the ship's automated drone fleet. Darius blinked. "What?" Without waiting for approval, the Eternity's hull opened up, and dozens of sleek, black combat drones launched into space. The bridge crew watched in awe as the drones swarmed the enemy fleet, moving too fast for the coalition ships to track. They'd weave between plasma blasts, targeting the enemy engines and weapons systems with deadly precision. Coalition ships began to falter. The once organized fleet was now in chaos, trying to fight off the unexpected swarm. Greaves let out a laugh. Where the hell were those hiding? The Guardians' red eyes glowed brighter. They were in standby mode. Now, they are active. The coalition fleet started to fall apart as their ships were disabled, one by one. Darius saw an opportunity. "Kala, is the jump drive ready?" She checked her console, then her eyes went wide with relief. "Yes, it's online." Darius didn't waste a second. "Then get us the hell out of here." Kala punched in the coordinates, and the Eternity's ancient jump drive activated. A deep hum filled the ship. Outside, the remaining coalition warships scrambled to react, but they were too late. A bright flash engulfed the Eternity, and in the next instant, the ship was gone. Only the wreckage of the coalition fleet remained. They had won. But the war was far from over. Because now, the entire galaxy knew the truth. The UNSC Eternity had returned, and humanity was no longer extinct. The UNSC Eternity emerged from its jump, its massive hull gliding through the dark void of space. The ship had barely escaped the coalition's ambush, but Darius knew their battle was far from over. The moment the coalition regrouped, they would come back stronger, angrier, and with more firepower. Inside the bridge, the crew was recovering from the intense fight. Sparks still flickered from damaged panels, and the ship's engines hummed with exhaustion. Kala ran her hands over the controls, scanning their surroundings. "We made it, but that was too close." Greaves let out a breath. "Yeah, but did you see those drones? That was insane. They tore those ships apart like paper." Darius turned to the towering Guardian 09, the AI construct that had activated the hidden combat drones. "You didn't tell us the ship had that kind of firepower." The Guardian's red eyes flickered. The drones were in standby mode. "I calculated a 79.3% probability that deploying them would lead to our survival. That probability has now increased to 82.6%. Greaves scoffed. "So generous." Darius ignored the sarcasm. "What else is this ship hiding?" Guardian 09 was silent for a moment, then finally spoke. "Much." The crew exchanged glances. The Eternity had already shocked the galaxy by coming back online. But if there were more secrets buried in its systems, they needed to find them before the coalition did. Kala interrupted their thoughts. "Commander, I'm picking up a distress signal. Human origin." Darius's eyes widened. "Impossible. Humanity was wiped out centuries ago." Kala shook her head. "It's real. It's coming from an old human colony world, but the signal is weak and encrypted. It could be a trap." Greaves leaned forward. "Or it could be survivors." Darius's mind raced. If there were any surviving humans, they had to find them. But if the coalition was baiting them into another battle, they needed to be ready. He turned to Guardian 09. "Can we reach them before the coalition?" The AI processed the data. "Unknown. However, if the distress signal was sent intentionally, it is likely that others have detected it as well. Darius didn't hesitate. Set a course. We're going. The Eternity's thrusters roared to life, pushing the ancient supercarrier toward the coordinates. Minutes later, Kala's voice came through again, but this time, she sounded tense. "Commander, we got a problem." Darius frowned. "What is it?" She zoomed in on the colony's coordinates, and the screen filled with multiple heat signatures. The coalition is already there. A massive fleet hovered over the planet. Dozens of warships formed a blockade, their weapons trained on the surface below. Darius clenched his fists. If there were survivors down there, they were in grave danger, and the Eternity was the only thing standing between them and annihilation. The UNSC Eternity dropped out of faster-than-light travel, its massive hull casting a shadow over the planet below. The distress signal was still transmitting, but now, the truth was clear. This wasn't just a call for help. It was a battlefield. The Coalition's blockade was fully operational. Dozens of warships patrolled the skies, their weapons locked on the surface. Energy bursts and missile trails painted the atmosphere as Coalition ground forces assaulted what looked like the ruins of an ancient human colony. Kala's voice was tense. "Commander, I'm detecting human life signs. A small force, but they're outnumbered at least 50 to 1. Greaves swore under his breath. "The bastards are wiping them out." Darius didn't hesitate. "How fast can we get down there?" Guardian 09's red eyes flickered. A direct assault would be unwise. The enemy's fleet has sufficient firepower to. "I wasn't asking for a risk analysis," Darius cut in. "I was asking how fast we can get down there." Guardian 09 paused, then responded. "Landing within enemy-controlled space carries a 72% chance of failure. However, an alternative strategy exists." Darius raised an eyebrow. "Let's hear it." The AI's voice deepened. "The Eternity's primary combat systems have not yet been fully activated. However, a hidden function remains operational, the Titan Protocol." A silence fell over the bridge. Kala frowned. "Titan Protocol. What is that?" Guardian 09's metallic fingers tapped against the console. "A last resort defensive system. The Eternity does not deploy conventional fighter wings. It deploys Titan-class warforms." Greaves' eyes widened. "You mean giant war machines?" Guardian 09 nodded. "Approximately 50 meters in height, each equipped with adaptive shielding, kinetic barriers, and energy weaponry capable of decimating enemy forces. The Titans were designed to operate in planetary assaults, and have not been deployed since the war against the Exeltar Dominion." Darius grinned. "Then it's about time they saw action again." He turned to his crew. "Prepare the Titan drop. We're not just saving those survivors, we're taking this planet back." The ship rumbled as Guardian 09 activated the forgotten war machines. Deep within the Eternity, massive doors slid open, revealing towering humanoid warforms, their armor glowing with ancient power. The ship's alarm system blared. Titan deployment sequence initiated. Darius gripped the controls as the Titans were launched, plummeting toward the battlefield below. As they neared the surface, their thrusters activated, slowing their descent before they slammed into the ground, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. The Coalition forces froze in terror. They had never seen anything like this. One of the Titan warforms raised its arm, charging a plasma cannon, and with a single shot, an entire Coalition dropship exploded in midair. The tide of battle turned instantly. Darius and his crew followed, deploying in dropships alongside the Titans. They landed near the human survivors, worn, battered, and on the brink of destruction. Their leader, an old war-hardened soldier, stared in disbelief. "You're human," the old soldier gasped. "But we thought we were the last ones." Darius stepped forward. "Not anymore." Above them, the Eternity's weapons came to life, firing at the Coalition fleet. Enemy ships exploded, unable to withstand the full power of the awakened supercarrier. The battle was over in minutes. The coalition fleet shattered, and their ground forces retreated in terror. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy had witnessed the true power of humanity. And this was just the beginning. The UNSC Eternity had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same again.